Welcome to Visibility Unlimited. I'm Leslie Short, your host and owner of the Cavu Group. We work with companies and organizations to expand beyond their current culture. Visibility Unlimited discusses topics focusing on diversity, inclusion, leadership, culture, and current events. Look out for my book, Expand Beyond Your Current Culture, out January 2021. Enjoy this episode and remember to subscribe to stay updated on future podcasts. The power shift of women. Women are moving into positions of power faster than ever. Yet some are leaving the workplace faster than ever. Why the battle zone for female leadership? Join us as we discuss the power shift of women.
Welcome to webinar 24, the power shift of women. What we wanted you to think about this week as we discuss the power shift of women is, what does it mean to be a woman leader? This evening's discussion will center around topics such as how do we as women fight for women's rights, support laws against them? Are we prepared for women in power? If you had to select a boss that's a woman, does her color matter? And does a woman's age matter in leadership? Again, welcome to webinar 24, the power shift of women. My name is Michael Lewis. I head up a group by the name of the Village Collective that enjoys doing these bi-weekly webinars with Leslie Short of the Cavu Group. And so with that being said, I will hand it over to her to introduce herself as we proceed with webinar 24.
Hi, I'm Leslie Short, the owner of the Cavu Group and the host of Visibility Unlimited, which is the podcast that these webinars turn into. So I'm excited that you all have joined. I know my familiar faces, so excited about that. You know, clearly this is the moment for women, and clearly this is not the moment for women. So as always, I feel that women are put in this position where when I start thinking about this, it's not even so much about women leaders, it's about the power shift that's now happening. And the power shift that women are not only being leaders, but women are owning, that women are holding the purse strings of power as well. And so I'll just name off a few. So clearly we have a vice president now. We've had women run for president, not new, way before Hillary, right? And not only white women, Black women, there have been women that have run for president. There has been women that's run for vice president. We now have a woman vice president. We have sports now. And I shouldn't say now because women have been in sports. You may not have been able to see them because they weren't allowed on the fields or on the courts or any of that. Now they're not only on the fields and the courts, they're running the plays. They are the general managers. They are the ones that now you have to come speak to if you want your box or you want to know how the business is run. They're in basketball. It's across the board where you're seeing women in sports now. You know, my girl, I'm acting like I know her, Dolly Parton, my new best friend. Like, I have loved Dolly forever, just because she was a woman in the day that took no mess. She's always said, this is a character. And if they were hired the dumb blonde that can sing and I run my business, then I will be the dumb blonde that can sing and runs my business. And to see where she is today and, going around at the moment going, hey, if you get a vaccine from this company, you better thank Dolly because she's the one that put up the rest of the money. At what point did a woman have that money to walk in and say, go ahead, make that happen? And pretty much that's what she just did. Then you have Black women that pretty much, I'm gonna call it what it is, save the vote, depending on which side of the rope you're on, but came out and voted like there was no tomorrow, and did the ground swelling of voting and just took that charge. They weren't asked to go do that. They were like, something needs to be done. We're gonna do it. Um, you have more women on public boards, which means they're getting paid. You know my theory on that. And you see more Black and more Latino women, you see more women on boards. But I also hope that all the women that are on these boards have a voice on these boards, that they're just not sitting in a seat because they are a woman, a Black woman, a Latino woman, an Asian woman, that they're there because they bring the added value and the diversity of thought that is needed in any company. And then if you saw my post, I asked, where's my men that's supporting the powerful women? Because I don't know if you saw the article that Kamala's husband has now stepped away from his law firm to be there for her. Yes, please. I take one of those. I'm good. I'll stand in that line. So there's just a lot that's happening. I don't know. Let's start with the men and we can go. And you know how this works. You can jump in at any time and share your thoughts or stats or whatever you have. This is a conversation. The men that are supporting the woman, and I'm not saying support in paying bills or housing or jewelry, but standing and saying, go run for president. I got you. Go run for Beefy. I got you. And you know what? I'm gonna be the first man, the second man, or whatever they're gonna call me now. I got that too. And not only I got that, I'm gonna walk away for what I'm doing to be that support for you. Then you have Jill Biden, who's like, I got you. I've always had you. But guess what? I'm not giving up my career on teaching either. So there's a power shift that's happening. I would love to know, and I always want to hear, what's your thoughts on the power shift? You know, Micah, from a man's point of view, hey Jeff, what's the power shift? Would you walk away if you were with a woman that had such a position that you knew she may need an extra backbone, or she doesn't need extra backbone, but you just want to be there?
I find no problem with it. You know, if I were in a similar situation where I was going to become the first gentleman, or not even the first gentleman, if I was going to be, any, if I'm not married, but if I was in a situation where, I had to support my spouse and step away from a career or uproot my family and move to another place, to do so, to support them, I would have no problem with that, because I feel that, when you make that commitment to be with a person, it basically can go either way, and it shouldn't be a situation where the male in the relationship is always having to go and be the one that's leading things. I feel that women are in that place, have been in that place for a long time, to take that initiative and go and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. And
Right.
basically the guy falls in line with it. So I'm very much supportive about what we're seeing now in situations. I mean, you mentioned women in sports, and I'm just giving it a few. The Bus family, she literally runs the LA Lakers organization and brought it in there. So I don't think she's married though, but at a situation where she runs things, she's very powerful in the sports world as well, to make decisions. So, if any male would have a problem with that, then I think they're looking at things through the wrong vantage point. So that's just my perception. But if I was in similar situation, yeah, I would give up my $1 million a year law firm degree to be the first gentleman. No questions asked whatsoever. So,
Bags packed, ready to go, huh?
let's go. Let's go. When did the train
Well,
leave?
the funny thing is, on my unconscious bias training that I do, one of my questions is, if you had to have a woman's boss, do you care what color she is? And there was a man that was so offended that I asked that. And he goes, "Why did you ask that?" I said, "For that reaction." I was like, "There's no right or wrong answer. That's your preference. That's showing you who you are." But why I said the question is, why were you so offended by me asking? Was it because I said, if you had to have a woman's boss, or if I made you put a race to it? Is there a difference for you, or you just don't want to be bothered at all whatsoever and just call it a day? And he couldn't answer me. And so he was just like, "Okay, never mind." I said, "But it's something to think about." And I did that so that you could think, do you react differently? Because the shift is happening. It's not happening. The shift is happening now.
Can I add something to that?
Of course you can.
So in my work career, I've had I've had so I started off at AT&T Wireless back when I was in college, a freshman in college, and my supervisor there was a woman. I worked there for 4 years and had different women um, as my supervisor. And I will say this: I have no problem as a male. I have no problem with a woman being reporting to a woman. I don't see the difference in it. However, there is a difference between there is a difference between the race, and I can only speak from my experience and what I've experienced early on in my career. And yeah, and I'll give one example where I was doing this part time to make it through school and everything else of the sort. So it wasn't like a full time career for me or anything. But one of the things that one of my supervisors said to me at one of my like yearly reviews, like really stuck to me till this day. And you're talking about half my life ago, more than half my life ago. And she made a comment that I intimidated her. And I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, well, why is that? I'm just 18-year-old kid working for $12 an hour, just trying to make money basically.
Yeah.
And I still grapple to what that exactly meant to that day. Was it because I was educated and I intimidated her? She may thought I was coming for a job or something of the sort, or was it another way I intimidated her as well? And it's one of these things. I wish I could go back and have literally a discussion that we have here as of now to truly understand where that came from. But that
So you
wasn't the
didn't
first.
ask her?
I mean, I was 18 years old at the time. Didn't have.
Oh, you gotta know. Now you're gonna be, no wonder you're still thinking about it.
Yeah, but it's one of these things where I wish I could go back and have a conversation as a grown adult that's now a little bit more mature to be able to conceptualize those type of conversations and what those nuances of those things meant. But yeah, I would say this from a male's perspective: I have no problem with having a woman boss or having any other person. I think, like I said, at least in my lifetime, it hasn't been a situation where it's been like the whole male versus female thing, at least in the optics that I've seen them at in corporate America. Because it's always been, hey, everyone's equal to a certain extent in the corporate environment. So I'd be curious to know if anybody else's experience along those lines. Not to take your prompt away from you, but
No, I think that the equal is the equal within people's minds. There's equal that, oh, there's tons of women in the organization. But when you look who's making the decisions,
Right.
it's the men that are sitting here and the women are here, but there's always that little weird tip that kind of moves up that is still being signed off, not by the women. And I think that's why so many people are celebrating the GM for the baseball team, because you're not getting any higher than her per se, because we always have boards, we always have this, we always have that. But she's who you're going to.
Yeah, and in the corporate world, the highest you usually typically see a woman go to is HR. Why do they always, they just put her in HR?
Well, yes, I believe that was definitely the case. Now, I have a good girlfriend who is VP of Global. I'm gonna call her out because she's hot. Kim, I'll just say her first name. VP of Global for IBM. So in her entire career, she's always been. Now, I'm not going to speak about it because she's not here, but we're not going to say it was a rowboat that was a nice sailing way to get there.
Right.
But I have known women that VP. I working with someone now, one of my clients who's president of a major organization. And there's people on boards and things like that. And I always refer to her before I refer to everyone else. Well, what do you think? Or are you comfortable with the direction we're moving? And I will call her name to make sure that she gets to respond, because she is younger. So that's why I say, does age matter as well? Do you want, because let's be honest, there's a lot of, and I'm calling them startups, and I'm going to do quotes, because I mean startups as in Rent the Runway was considered a startup. They're run by young women that are 30 something. So your bosses nowadays can be 30 something and the employees can be 60 something. Does it matter, or is it the talent and the insight that someone brings? And anyone can jump in. There's another company, I'm just gonna say luggage, that was done by two very young women that skyrocketed. And I remember them saying, we're hiring people for a culture and for this, that, and the other. And as they grew and expanded, that did not work well. And is it partly because the life experience that needs to come with anyone to be a leader? Because I think book smart is great. Life smart is great. But if you don't know how to put those two together, along with experience of life smart and book smart, it can go awry. Now, here's the one thing that I've heard men say, and anyone can jump in. They don't like to admit it sometimes, but you know what? I want a woman running this because she's going to get it done. I worked with someone that was like that. He's like, yo, you all are a pain in the butt. You ask me 8,000 questions. I asked the men to go do something. They just go do it and leave me alone. You all, because it was like 4 of us around him, and we all had something that we needed. And he was just like, Jesus. He goes, but here's what I know. The 4 of you going to ask me 80 questions, and the 4 of you going to go get it done. The 3 that I told to go do something a week from now, I still won't get done. And so there is that dynamic, though he was still the CEO. He really did give the power. He really did turn a lot of power over to me in regard to making sure that his company was running properly. So since we know the power shift has already been doing this for some time now we're here. We're not quite even. I don't know what that's going to be even. So I'll leave that alone because people are dropping like flies. But the window is open. I say, and the door is cracked. So how do we keep putting our foot through the door, our knee to the door? It's a lean in. So each body part's got to get in. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that those opportunities, the equity for women to continue to grow from younger and from out of HR positions through, and not be pigeonholed. So it's men seeing women as leaders, and not only as leaders, but as owners, as someone that is about, seeing us as business people. That's what it really comes down to. We don't need a title. I did a panel, I guess, a week ago, and it was women in business. And they ended the panel and they were like, Leslie, what would you like to see? What would you like to see happen in women in business? I was like, I would like to be called a business person. I like to say, if you want to go do business and this is the field, go speak to her. I don't need to say it's a woman in business. If you're not buying my shoes and my pocketbook, you don't need to know all of that. Let's get this deal done. So what's the thought on the power shift?
If I could add to that, I think it's generational, for one, and not to speak about anybody else that's in an older generation, but I think, at least in my generation, it's more of it's common knowledge that we're on equal playing field. And I guess where you're seeing this now at is in places like the luggage company
Wait,
Away.
I have to stop you. It's
Sure.
common knowledge where that we're on equal.
Well, when I say it's common knowledge, like when I talk about my generation, when I thinking about going through college, thinking about going through high school, thinking about going through the early years of like working in corporate America and everything, there was no undertones or anything else that women weren't on an equal playing field, And so I can't speak about any other generation, but there's no notion in my head that said that, oh, there needs to be a shift. Not saying that there's not a shift that's happening, but there was no inclination that a woman couldn't do the same
It's
thing.
more accepted as just fact that women are part of the deal.
Yeah. And so like seeing some of the things when you mentioned the previous two companies, the two companies that just started, they're in my generation. And I think what we're seeing now, when you're saying the power shift of women, we're just seeing this generation now that's maturing, me included, to that age where now we have that confidence to run our own business and we're starting our own thing. And I think you'll see a lot more of that in the coming years after that, with Generation Z and everything else of the sort, being in part because everyone, at least in my generation, came from, like, I guess, an equal playing field where it wasn't expected for you to go into this particular field, or it wasn't expected for you to do this particular thing. So yeah, I mean, that's just why I wanted to add it to it when we're saying like this new power shift and making it equal. It's always been equal, at least in my generation's eyes. And to give you an analogy to that as well, too, like when we talk about things such as like racism in the world as well, previous generations, had to go through, the old generation had to go through segregation, like my parents and everything else of the sort, compared to these younger generations didn't have to go through these same things. So we see things a lot differently than the older generation, where it's not so much as, hey, we have to roll out the red carpet. It's more of, hey, the carpet's already there for any one of us to walk on and walk to whatever path we want to go to.
Nika, that's a really good point. And I used to think the same way as far as both women and race, that, well, once the next generation gets older, all that's going to go by the wayside. But I will say, with this last election, seeing how many people voted on both sides, I was shocked. I thought it was going to be a landslide.
Yeah.
And so I really do wonder. And I think it's probably because it depends on the younger generation's parents, what they were exposed to, and it's still going to continue in those families.
So that's where a power shift of mine. Jeff, were you trying to say something? We can't hear you. He's like, when you get it, we'll come back to you. That's where the power shift really starts to change in all of this. When they interviewed little girls this past week, you know what they were asking for? When they said, what would you like to be? Or what can you be? Little girls were like, president, vice president, and astronaut. Because that is what they actually saw this week, these last 2 weeks. There's a woman up in space right now. There's a Black man up in space. There's an Asian man up in space. And there's a white man up in space.
That's terrific.
And so the conversation also gets to shift on what you can be. Um, and so there was teacher. Women went to college to become a wife, find your husband. That's what,
home economics class.
that's what it was. Go find your husband. We're sending you to college to find a husband. Don't come back here without one. Like, and then it was like, where the grandbabies? Okay.
Right.
And yep, I love that, Nancy. It was already great. And then it's, oh, well, if you need a hobby, then it was the next generation of the Ruth Ginsburg that was like, not only am I gonna find a husband, but he better roll because I'm rolling. And she found that partner where both of them really move. Michelle and Barack, they found each other and they both really move. That's
powerful.
It's powerful, and it's not always the case, I think, as we all know. But also believe there's more cases out there than clearly what we know, where you can find that partner that will, and that's your personal partner, to really have that support and just be there and do their own thing and support you, and vice versa. When you have that already, I think, in your personal, walking into an office, walking into a meeting, you're walking in.
Yep.
You're not questioning. You already know everybody has questions. There's not a meeting I don't go into. I don't know people don't have questions. But guess what? That's their questions to have. I know what my purpose is here. That's the difference, I think. And that's the power shift that I think women are starting to feel, that they're walking in with purpose. And that's where I hope it continues to go, that we're not asking, is it okay that we're here? When you hear the interview, and I'm sorry, I don't have her name right in front of me right now, I'm blanking, I'm having a senior moment, of the GM for the baseball, her interview this past week, they were like, this is not new. Everyone knows you in the industry. Your name has been tossed and bounced around for GM for so long. And the reporter said, I'm just happy they finally caught up with you. You didn't catch up with them. You've been beyond prepared. They caught up with you. And I think that's a great attitude to have. That's what I took away, that corporations, boards, opportunities will catch up for those that have been there and have been doing the work and are prepared to do the work. And I shouldn't even say have been there, for those that are, have been doing the work, in the sense of not only paying their dues, but have the reputation to continue to grow. Because it was a point, and there's still a point, where if it didn't happen for you at one place, you have to know when it's time to leave. Because that power shift may not be a given to everyone. Yes. Yes. Is there a possibility? How do you maintain your personal life as you grow in your corporate career? Yeah, that's a hard one. It's not every man can't stand behind with or next to a woman. I always have a joke that I'm like, oh, it's always real sexy to say, yeah, okay, I'm put myself out there. Oh, my girl boxes and she's a dancer and she's wearing companies, until they realize at 4:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting up to go train. And then I'm coming back and I'm going into an office, and then there's events and there's this, and I have security calls for this celebrity. It's very cute to say that to all your friends, as opposed to living with that or being with that. And that's where, so let's talk about the next shift, which is a great leadway, Jackie, thank you. That for all the women that are making strides, we still have a long way to go. I want to be very clear on that. I don't want 3 women in the news all in 1 week to be like, woo, we made it. How about all the women that have now had to leave their offices, that had to leave their positions because of COVID. Not because of COVID-19, but when they had to look at the dynamics of their family. And they had to look at maybe who's bringing in more finances at this time, whose insurance is actually better and stronger. Because now, on top of me being, and we've spoken about this, wife, mother, partner, lover, mom, school teacher, counselor, grief counselor, like it's everything. And not saying that there's not men that have stayed home and taken that position as well, because I do know some of them. But and you have the records amount of women that have left the workforce in the last 8 months, more than ever before. So where does that put us? And we're talking executive women it's of levels had to walk away. So it's unbelievable. Yeah, you're right, Jeff. For some of these corporations, it is generational on how they think of who gets promoted, who should be sitting in the top. I had someone say to me, well, let's see, that's just going to shift the dynamic of the exec meetings. What now? What'd you say? And it kind of hurt him to say. He goes, but I want to be honest with you. I said, would you like to shift the the dynamics of a lawsuit? And he was like, oh. I was like, it's time. It's been time. You have qualified people here. You call on them for everything, but you don't give them the title and the money. That power shift has got to change, and the mind shift more than anything. The cultural shift has got to change. And until all of that aligns, it will go back to the same point of what? When will the corporation catch up to you? So is that when you leave and start your own thing? Because we also see that happening. You got to, Jeff's got to type because we can't hear you. So that's what happens when you're riding in New York and trying to be on a webinar. But it is, any other thoughts on how that power shift will happen in companies, will happen in your household?
I think it's closely aligned to what Jeff was saying as well too. I think it's generational, and I think that's what we're seeing now is as we're defining it as a power shift. I think it has more attuned to be generational is what it is, and being able to see people being able to run their own businesses and not have to rely on, because we're speaking in corporate terms what corporate America is, but you go back 20 years ago. And you look at what jobs are being started at that point in time and how they were being started, it's completely different than what jobs are being started now and who they're being started by. And I think what's in the midst of the all-encompassing umbrella, it's a generational shift that's happening. Right. And we're seeing where people are realizing that, for one, you don't have to take home ec. You don't have to go to college and go into sorority and then, get a liberal arts degree, and because you're going to get a job as an HR intern and move up in the HR ranks or whatever. You're now being able to see that, hey, I have these own ideas myself. And so therefore, I'm going to start my own business at this point and create my own culture within that. So I think what the shift that we're seeing is more of a generational shift. And we're seeing that not only in aspects from a male to female type situation, but we're seeing that from a social as well as socioeconomic situation as well, to demographics, whatever it may be. We now have more opportunities than we've had before, and women have more opportunities. Colored people have more opportunities. Black, Hispanic, whatever, to start your own thing. And I think that's what we're in the midst of. This is just a small segment of the last 100 years on progression of humankind. And so I personally think it's going to come to a point where, I don't know when that's going to happen, maybe a generation from now, where these discussions that we're having now will not happen. They will not happen. It's going to be commonplace to just step into an environment or an ecosystem, and you're going to have a mixed bag of whatever it is. So having a conversation on, do I want a boss that looks like this or identifies as this? These won't be conversations we're having. And I think we're seeing that happen now. And with the advent of technology, where again, 20 years ago to start a company, you needed to get $100,000 worth of equipment. You need to do all this other stuff, where now you literally can go to LegalZoom, incorporate a corporation, make a few calls, and have your first customers on the line progressing to that. And so I think that's what we're seeing now, is that shift there where but I think there needs to be a collective awakening to see that.
Yes.
And this goes from like speaking to other people about, like, for example, I was having a conversation with a person who's in corporate America now, a woman who's in corporate America now. She's around my age, and she wants to step out and start her own thing. Just having a conversation with her, telling her, give her that confidence to be like, hey, it's all right. You can need the umbrella of corporate America to get these things going, was very eye-opening for her. But I could see the hesitation within her thoughts and voices to be like, wow, can I really do this? So I think what needs to happen is that shift that needs to happen is the collective comes and says, you know what? We're just as equal. You put on pants the same way I put on pants, one leg at a time. And having that conversation to step out there on their own. And I think we'll see more executives in VP roles. I think we'll see more, or not presidential roles, presidents of a company, CEOs of companies. I think that's what we're seeing now here, but it needs to come from a collective to give people that confidence to know that there's opportunities out there. You just have to seize them.
And it's funny that you say generational, that word keeps coming back, because I think about when I left, a job, and I had the corner office, and could do whatever I wanted, and I ran everything. And I remember speaking to someone who was older, who was a CEO of a major bank. He used to fly back and forth to New York, so I used to see him every time he came in, and I was like, my company, and this was my other company, KI, I'm like, it's doing really well. If it's doing this well and I'm in-house and I'm not putting a lot of effort, I need to step out and go for it. And he was like, you have the corner office. And I remember that conversation, like, yeah, you sign checks, like you have all the power. And I was like, yeah, but it's not mine. It's not my company. So I have all the power for someone else. That's not mine. Mine is starting to grow. If I'm going to put this amount of effort into someone else's, why can't I put it in my own? And I think when that becomes less, as you said, as anomaly, like, oh, that person or that one has it doesn't make a difference the size, step out. With that, I think men will start to also shift, because the generation it will be nothing new. It will be that I have an internet company, you have an internet company. How do we partner? How do we move? You do you just see that. When you think about, it's funny, a chef, someone always said, but there's tons of women chefs. And I'm like, no, there's not. That's a field that's growing. Believe it or not, you think cooking and it's like, go little woman, be in the kitchen. Well, guess what? It was always men chefs. Or the industry that's booming. Well, and they'll probably hit me back and say it won't be booming because, again, two women, woo-woo. But a sommelier. That was a very male, and still is very male dominated, very hard to get into that circle. And one woman has just stepped out. She received one of the highest awards, and she gave it back because she felt that it wasn't being representative of the women that she saw starting to come up. And she's like, I feel that this was a token. I deserved it. But until I see other women even allowed in this circle, no. And so I love it. I love that we also have to turn around and say, it's time to make a stand. Like, what stand will women take? Like, where's everyone else? And not be so excited to be the only one, but to demand that not only am I not the only one, but I won't be the only one of this shade, whatever shade that is for everyone. Because with each of us as a woman, the diversity of thought comes into play. Nancy, you're going to say something?
I was a while ago, but keep going.
No, keep going. Come, jump in.
No, it's all right. It was like I had comments like quite a while ago and I can't even remember them. So keep going.
You know when to jump in, just feel free. And that's for anyone, just jump in. So it is really about not only the power shift of men, corporations, and generations, it's the power shift of women and the mind shift of women and how we view women in power.
So that was one of the things I was going to jump in on is, when you started talking about like making sure there are more of us, when instead of just celebrating, oh, I made it, I think that's one of the big shifts that we're starting to see is as there are more women in various roles, we're no longer competing as much with each other as maybe when I was first coming up. And I think that's another thing that we see anytime you're the only one, right? Whether it be of your race, of your gender identity, right? We start competing because we think that we only get the one token spot. So I think that's something that we're seeing the shift in. But the other thing I wanted to bring up earlier was about the generational comments. And there are definitely some generational ideals and institutions that have been built around these old ways of thinking is about the best way I can describe it, is things that weren't thought of before because everybody that was in power looked alike. So it's another thing that we're seeing some shifts in this, but I see we have to also be careful when we are the next generation or the next group coming up to not assume that all people that are of a certain age, for example, just like we wouldn't want them looking, I don't want people looking at me and assuming that just because I'm a woman, I'm interested in fashion and babies and weddings, right? I really, as you can probably tell, not really the fashion plate here. But it's something that I think we're learning, these new conversations and being able to really look at individuals and look at individual corporations. Like even when I hear corporate America, I giggle a little bit because the majority of corporations in America are small businesses about the size of probably Micah's company, right? And my company and yours, Leslie. So it's really interesting how we put all of this language out there to take shortcuts. So I think that's one of the big things that we've been doing here for the past several months is changing conversations to look deeper so that we can find real solutions. And we're making progress, but we still have a long way to go.
And thank you for that, because the conversations we and the language in the conversations, how many years have we said corporate America? What else do you call them? Well, we know some other things we can call them. Well, what do you call it? What do you call it? When you have Jessica Albert's company, what's the name of her company?
Honest Company.
Thank you.
Jessica Albert, yeah.
She's considered small business.
Mm-hmm.
So if she's considered small business in the way that the charts are, so we're going to go to these average, the way we always go through these charts. What are we? You're not a startup. You've been running, you are a business. You're not a startup. I'm not a startup, but we don't qualify. We're under small business. But I'm like, if Jessica Alba at millions and millions of dollars is still being considered small business, I don't know. Okay. Well, okay then. So I think it's, again, how do we, I don't think corporate America are probably like a new name. I don't know what you call them. You know, you have the big box stores. Remember they used to be called retailers, and then now they added the big box stores. Is that, you know, I'm always curious. I'm like, is that because they went to Costco and they gave you big boxes and you put your stuff in? I don't, you know, I don't know. But, so you have the language. So again, that goes back to what I said before. What do I want when people a couple years from now say, oh, that's a business owner? It doesn't need to say, oh, that's Leslie or Nancy or Deborah or Ann or, you know, business owner, female business owners. I just want to say they are business owners. If you are interested in that type of business, that's who you should speak to. You know, and until we have more of a generational shift of people that can make these decisions, you know, instead of the white tower of lovely white men with lovely white hair, with lovely white or blue shirts that button down, we all have to continue to constantly fight to prove that you even belong there. Forget alone your skills. And but we know that we know it's happening. We see it happening. We're not going to rush it, right? Things happen when they're supposed to happen. But there will not be denying it now. You know, that's the difference. You cannot say, it's like those with disabilities. You can no longer say, I cannot hire you because you need to telecommute. We're all doing that now. What's the new excuse? Michael, are you going to say something?
I think when you said what's the new excuse, I think there will be a new excuse. I mean, unless you literally like tear down the institutions as we know them, then it's still going to be another way to segment people. They're going to find some other way to segment people. Well, you wear glasses. I don't wear glasses, so I'm a segment. You're not a. I mean, there's always going to be a way. I was just thinking about while you were speaking. I was just thinking about like how can this be an even playing field, basically, and without it literally just blowing everything up, and then starting from scratch, it's going to literally take, you know, I said before, like one generation, but it's going to take multiple generations after this to finally level these things out. Because I mean, when you think about when you were saying the white ivory tower with white men holding things, that's still going on today. With especially with startups as well too. When you're talking about who's investing in these new companies that are coming out, oh, older generations, you know, that have passed it on to their kids, who are now doing the same thing and passing it on to their kids. So until yeah, we'll give you a few dollars over here. And I start thinking about as well, there are some venture capitalists out there that are women owned. I know one of them in New York, and they only focus on other women companies at that. But then again, there's only so many of them out there. You know, there's
So
only.
can I jump in real quick with that?
Sure.
Sorry, because that triggered that. There's not only do they not want to focus on that, they only focus on women companies. The big thing now is women in tech. We do other things and can run other business. Go ahead. Sorry, because I got that twice.
But going back and not to even jump on like the women in tech, but that's where this new wealth is coming from. If you look at the new wealth and to change the diagram as a whole, it has to come from there. You know, it has to come in from tech. That's how these guys. That's how the cycle continues. Basically, you get. I mean, it's written in like the Silicon Valley playbook or whatever. You find a rich friend, he gives you $1 million. You start a new business. And then you basically cash out and then rinse and repeat, do the same exact thing. So not to defend their choice about women in tech, but I think that's one of the ways, the only way, basically, the quickest way I could say, you know, without tearing the whole system down, is to focus on tech, you know, because they're looking at the bottom line, basically, you know, and please, anybody else share?
I'm not, you know, I don't take away from anyone doing anything. Yeah. I just always will push the envelope in the conversation to say that there are women doing amazing other business outside of tech, and don't get caught only in that, because you're fighting over the same 10 people when
Correct.
there are other businesses that you can take, develop, and grow and be in a market before someone else is. But you don't always have that creative side to see something else.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I just connected with a Black woman who has a winery and is doing amazing. And I connected with her because I saw her in an article, then I caught her on LinkedIn where someone posted it, and I'm following her, and I'm just proud, not only because she's a Black woman, but yes, be in the wine industry. I know a woman that I was sparring with, and it was passed down generations to her, but she's running it. And I love to see her and her kids running the vineyard. Like, yes, there will be industries that were typically, I'm doing the air quotes for those that are on the podcast, were not assigned, and I'm going to say just that, for women. That was not where we should, don't you think you should take home ec? Why are you in even photography? Think about that. Like, why are you doing that years ago? And we know that you can decide to do whatever you want to do. And I think you can decide to do it however you need to get through. We don't need to wait for a power shift for someone else to think about it. You got to get ready to put on some pads and a helmet and bust through some doors, windows, and do the fields. And we see it happening, and we've seen it happen in the past. But now there's as you know, as I look and go, as we begin to wrap up, we know there has to be a generational shift, an institutional shift, a mind shift, because there's definitely a power shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jeff,
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, welcome back, Jeff.
I was on the bus. Thank God for MPA anyway. So I think there are a lot of things that need to shift. And my background is in the faith-based community. And I know that a lot of the values that kind of have been put forth were very male dominated because the religious and the faith-based tenets, they kind of indoctrinated generations of people in this sexism and racism. So again, like I was saying, it's definitely generational, and I think you're going to have to just have a lot of people die out because that's the only way it's
Or
going to.
retire. You're right.
Yeah, or retire. Yeah, yeah. That's my thought.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna toot Jeff's horn for a second because he is the most amazing singer and musician.
Uh,
Amazing for your spirit on a good day or a bad day. I'm just gonna throw that out there. But yes, I remember a female preacher friend, not who we know together. So I don't want to put her on blast, who said that she got up. She was actually assistant minister at a church, and she got up to preach, and the entire church got up, and everyone was just like, and the head preacher looked at her and said, "Oh, I'm going to need you to hand that to me. Her sermon, I'll preach it again in another month." And then when they went in the back from all of that, "You're great. Oh, why don't you go get us some tea?
mm,
Go get the tea and pound cake." And so, yes, until Jeff said it, I'm just gonna repeat it, till they die out or retire out,
yeah.
the mind shift to someone of a different generation
Yes.
is hard to shift,
Yes.
but they will have no option now. Micah, you were gonna say something?
hopefully that's the answer to it. I'm just saying this is that, like, going back to what Deborah said earlier, yeah, we just had an election and over 70 million people voted one way. So we hope it wasn't all just an older generation. So we just hope that some of these values that are held are not passed down from corporation to corporation. When I talk about, I mean, from generation to generation, talking about some of these corporations that have been here a long time, talking about your General Electric, talking about, you know, any of your telcos that are out there. We just hope that that mindset, that when those executives do retire or pass, they don't pass those same ideologies down to them as well. Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean,
Because look who sits behind under them. And so that's where it does get passed, because look who's sitting under the ones that are sitting there at this moment. And so that's where we got to start getting up there, so that when they do shift, retire, pass on, bless on, all of that, that there is a diversity of thought that comes in any shape or form to start changing things. And there's one last thing that we didn't bring up, so I'll just do it really quickly. The women who want the power shift, but don't want us to have the rights to do with our bodies that we need to do. So again, the power shift and mind shift of women, the power shift and mind shift of men, the mind shift and power shift of corporations, institutions, and all of it. The shift and the tide is here, and it will keep turning. As always, I thank you for joining. Our time goes by fast, everyone.
This has been awesome.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Everyone stay safe.
Okay.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and you'll join us again soon at Visibility Unlimited. Thank you.